my name's Louise and I'm a volunteer with the Friends of First Farm, and today I'm going to take you on a tour of our amazing wetlands. So come, let's go take a look. First Farm is an integrated wetland created as a sustainable urban drainage system, which is now an important site for conservation and well-being for the local community in Enfield. The transformation of First Farm began in 2014 with the collaboration of the Friends of First Farm, the Council, Thames Water and Thames 21. So you might find yourself asking, why am I standing by this manhole cover? I'll tell you. Prior to 2014, this manhole cover and the river that's flowing through it, the Moorbrook, is all you would have seen of the Moorbrook, which is one of Enfield's longest rivers. Here in First Farm, the whole wetlands that you see before you has actually been created by daylighting the Moorbrook and allowing to run its free course through the wetlands and create the array of habitats that you see. So this path that we're actually on now that leads up to the wetlands is actually the same path that the Moorbrook takes, and it goes up there just to the outflow that you'll see in a minute. Either side you can see that we have our orchard here with lots of different variety of fruited species. They were kindly donated by Thames Water. They came and did a corporate volunteering day with us in December last year. And they've done many other days, that was the most recent. You can also see we have a great many native wildflowers that have self-seeded along these two bunds here, which we're very pleased with. Every year we see greater and greater diversity, which is really encouraging. So now we're just going to go and check out the outflow. So here we are at the southern inlet. So this is where the Moorbrook comes out into the open, and as you can see, it's a mass of diversity. So much so that actually the culvert is obscured from view, so unfortunately I won't be able to show you that. But we do have some pictures that I'll pop in for you. So I've mentioned the term SUD, so that's Sustainable Urban Drainage System, quite a few times now without giving too much background. So just briefly, SUDs are used to improve the physical environment in a multitude of ways, primarily to prevent flooding, improve urban drainage and quality of waterways. And it is essentially a natural flood management technique as opposed to hard engineering techniques such as walls and things of that nature, and so they mimic hydrological processes. So another key factor behind the creation of First Farm and this sustainable urban drainage system that acts very well here is the ability that these systems have to prevent localised urban flooding. They obviously have a huge capability to hold and store a lot of water that would otherwise be in the culvert system. And as you can imagine, during periods of heavy rainfall and when you also get storm sewage overflow, as a consequence, flooding of polluted water will be captured by the wetlands and therefore won't affect local surrounding properties. One of the ways it does this, other than just the actual wetland cells themselves and the reed banks, are also the intentionally placed bunds that you can actually see behind me. These act as a further defence to localised flooding, and as you can see, they're a lot prettier than a lot of hard engineering flood defences that tend to degrade over time, whereas all we've seen with our wetlands and the habitats here is further improvement in habitat health and diversity. So this is where the southern outflow first meets the wetland cells, as you can just see here by the bridge. Here are the three wetland cells. I'm just going to walk around in a minute and we'll look at the northern inlet, but as you can see we have here the southern inlet. This is actually the point at which when we're having a lot of pollution incidents, at which Thames Water they'll actually come, and what they often do is they install a boom, and that basically it's like a big round floaty thing, not a technical term, and they lay that over the top of the water just in front of the bridge, and what that basically acts as is it stops the pollutants that generally lay on the top surface of the water from entering into the wetland cells, where it becomes a bit more problematic in terms of containing the pollution. When the pollution levels are really high, we do see pollution fungus at the bottom. Thames Water are aware of this, and they say that they are trying to remediate any misconnections in the local area. So I just want to give a little background to the urban water cycle, and this will help you understand how pollutants actually get into the wetland systems, and how the wetland system at First Farm actually effectively cleanses the water of these pollutants as well. So basically the urban water cycle, when it rains, the water from our roofs and roads, what happens is they wash it into the drains and pipes, and this takes it to the nearest watercourse. So obviously all of the pollution, such as like road runoff and things like oils and heavy metals from the cars on the roads, and then also things like silts and things like that from people's roofs, all get into the waterways as a consequence. That generally doesn't have that much of a negative impact upon the biodiversity of our watercourses. However, what we do know to be a particular problem is something called misconnections. So this is also essentially wastewater from people's sinks, washing machines, dishwashers, and sometimes toilets, and they basically are piped into surface drains, which, as I was explaining, they're the drains that take the water runoff from rain to the nearest rivers. So these misconnections, often it's essentially hasn't been done properly, and they've plumbed into the wrong drains, and this is a big problem. Thames Water, they also chase up these misconnections, and they follow them up, and they try and track down even the specific house or properties or businesses that these misconnections are coming from. And unfortunately, actually, this is not, there's no certification or anything like that for making sure that plumbers don't create misconnections and that they plumb into the right drains. So that's something that we're actively trying to work on within Thurles Farm. So this is the northern inlet for the Moorbrook, for the wetland cells. It enters just over there, and then what happens is it feeds the wetland cell 2 and then moves directly onto the wetland cell 3, whereas the southern Moorbrook outlet over there feeds wetland cell 1, so they are fed by different inlets basically. And what you can see here at the moment is obviously a very, very full wetland. Unfortunately, what happens is in February we're actually meant to remove 25% of all of the reeds, and this is to keep the habitat in good check and balance, but unfortunately for the Friends of First Farm don't have the resources to do this on their own, and so it is a bit out of control, but we are hoping that with some help of some other partner organisations that we can get that under control. We do also have some problems with a few invasive species, plants. We're talking bulrushes. They have the big fairy rush obviously, and that's wind pollinated, so that can be a real problem. We also have a couple of terrapins, thanks to the people that thought it would be a good idea to come and release them there here. And we also do have the oak processionary moth as well. So what that is the in the oak processionary moth's caterpillar form, i.e. the larvae, will basically eat the oak trees that we have here. A lot of them actually that are quite mature and ancient, so obviously a lot of them have TPOs, so it's kind of even more important that we protect them, and they also do present a threat to human and animal health. Aside from that, the quality of the habitat overall is good, and that's taken into consideration the kind of constant problems of pollution, which is actually what this site was set up to deal with anyway, so we wouldn't expect not to have that. Yeah, we also have a very strong bird population. We have herring gulls, black-headed gulls, lesser black-headed gulls, moor hens, coots, swans, mute swans. I believe we had dabchick, tufted duck. Lots of different species, lots of different native wild birds as well that we're seeing, and an ever increasing biodiversity is obviously what we're achieving, and it's definitely something that you can easily track even kind of seasonally. So I just wanted to give some more technical information about the wetlands themselves and their capacity. So the amount of water that actually flows through First Farm at any given time is about 25 litres per second. And cumulatively what that means is there's about 800 million litres of water flowing through the wetlands a year. So obviously that's quite a bit of water. When the wetlands were actually installed, they were installed to prevent localised flooding, and there is an associated flood risk to the properties in Edmonton and the A10. So these wetlands were created to help prevent that, and they have a capacity of 30 million litres of water during a flood event, and that basically works out to protect about 140 properties in the localised area. That's the section of the Moorbrook that runs through First Farm. But it also drains, as a whole, it drains a 350 hectare catchment. So we're now in First Farm's outdoor classroom. So this area has actually been purpose built to give outdoor education sessions. We've got the auditorium over there, perfect for presenting a tour, and we also have the wetland windows here just in front of me, which make great viewing platforms, and the actual windows themselves really help to focus attention into one particular area, which is really good when you're trying to explain to people about the urban water cycle, which is obviously in a wetlands like this is probably one of the best places to teach the urban water cycle, one of the best places to teach kids about food chains and things like that. So this space really kind of capitalizes on, you know, outdoor learning. So now that you've seen quite a bit of the site, you probably find it very hard to imagine that First Farm was once a very flat, plain old recreation ground with just the ancient hedgerows and spinney. No wetland at all, and people were completely unaware of its presence running underneath the ground, except from when there was flooding due to storm overflow of the surface drains. So actually, to give a bit more of a finer detail on how these wetlands were created, all of the excavations for the wetland actually remained on site. So if you can imagine that everything was dug out, the wetland cells, the water courses were all dug out, and then with that soil, which was actually 30,000 tons of earth, which worked out to be approximately one handful of soil for every person in England. So that earth was used to create the flood buns that you see, and these are basically made out of the earthworks from the wetlands, and basically what they do is they provide further flood defence. So to give a bit of background, years ago, prior to it being culverted, the area was marshland, and there were many tributaries and streams and brooks that flowed through the area. Basically, generally what happened in about the 1950s is many of these waterways were actually culverted. So what that means is they were piped and they were put underground, and that's so that the land could actually be developed, because obviously you don't want to build a house on a marshland or a football pitch on a marshland, even for that matter. is our first farm interpretation board. It is our biggest one, and it has actually been kept in relatively good condition thanks to the local community. Unfortunately, we did have another one over by the Spinney that was actually vandalised, unfortunately, so we're very pleased that that this one, which is our biggest and most descriptive, is still in place. So as you can see here, is a brief illustrated description of the diversity that we get in the pond. So for instance, here you have water violets. I'm not too sure if you can see those. You can definitely see the water irises. We'll show you those in a minute. Basically, the entire purpose of this interpretation board is for when people come and do pond dipping with us. So we tend to do this with groups such as the Beavers and Clubs and local school groups. And what we do is we take the kids onto the pond dipping platform, we give them nets, and we basically let them loose to find all of the lovely invertebrates in the water. This is also really another great way of surveying the water quality as well. So we do see the diversity is not terrible, but it could be improved. What we've actually done to improve that diversity specifically in the pond, in 2019 we installed floating islands, and the idea of this was to bring some vegetation closer to the pond dipping platform to enhance the habitat, so we'd find more invertebrates there. We also believe that one of the problems with our pond, which actually isn't a pond, is a continuation of the wetlands, because there is an inflow and an outflow, is that this current kind of disrupts the ability of vegetation to root in the pond, thus kind of negatively impacting on the diversity. But we're trying to rectify that with the islands. And just to say, you know, pollution, as I mentioned before, is a continual problem here in the wetlands, so we know that it's very unlikely for us to achieve amazing diversity because of that, but we're definitely trying our best, and we do have good sound water quality here in Furze Farm. So I've explained to you how pollution gets into the wetlands, and I've also explained how the watercourse and the wetland cells itself help to remediate these pollution incidents. I'm now going to talk about just how significant the improvements to the water quality from the inflow in comparison to the outflow of the wetlands is. Obviously, water quality is made up of many different parameters. I'm just going to talk about a quick few key parameters that we've seen really significant improvements in. So here I am actually citing a report done by Enfield Council and Thames 21, looking at basically different parameters of water quality, and using the Water Framework Directive as a guideline. So looking here at ammonia, so in comparison, the North Branch Inlet decreases 68.7% compared to the outflow, so that's really significant. And then biological oxygen demand, this is actually a proxy measurement really of the organic pollution in the water, how much is being taken up by those organic processes. It improved significantly again, not quite so much, with a mean decrease of 28%. And then bacteria within the water, often coming from sewage waste, so fecal coliform bacteria, including E. coli and types of salmonella. So that was a mean decrease of 78%, so again really high decrease. And phosphate, which is a key nutrient actually for eutrophication, was a mean decrease of 69%. So I mean, really obviously the wetlands just doing its job magnificently. There's not really kind of much more to say than that, is there? So I really think, you know, this is where we need to be looking in terms of how we clean our waterways and create beautiful habitats and homes for wildlife and a haven for the community at the same time. So I've spoken a lot about the pollution at Furze Farm, and I've even given some details on how just how much pollutants are removed from the watercourse on the journey through Furze Farm. What I want to talk about now is the impact that has on the watercourse overall. And when I say overall, what I mean is the Moorbrook, as you will see, is actually reculverted under the A10. It then re-emerges in Pims Park as the Pims Brook. There's a suds here in place as well, which consists of 3 wetland cells. And again, they are maintained and they have reed beds. From here, it then flows on to the River Lee, and then the River Lee flows on into the Thames and then out into the sea. So, you know, Furze Farm is a very small part of a much bigger waterway, and having these suds, you know, through on the journey with the waterway, really cumulatively, we are seeing such great benefits. I don't obviously have to list all of the benefits because you've seen most of the benefits on this journey through Furze Farm with me, and you get to see even more. But definitely in terms of community, you've not seen that so much, but here at Furze Farm we have a very kind of strong community, and we run lots of events and we do outdoor education sessions, and these open, green, sustainable urban drainage sites provide a great platform for that, and that's really exciting. Also economically, you know, the cost of urban pollution, especially in waterways, is, you know, something water companies are definitely concerned about, and you know, I think if that makes it an incentive for them to install them, then we should really you know, take advantage of that while we can. I really hope you enjoyed following the course of the Moorbrook through Furze Farm with me. However, Furze Farm is not just a wetland. In fact, some of its most important habitats are our ancient hedgerows. So we're going to go check them out now, and then we'll have a look at a stumpery and a few other important areas of Furze Farm. So stick around. So Furze Farm is actually a sink, so that is a site of interest in nature conservation, and that recognition is actually owing to what is left of the fragmented broadleaf woodland, so what we call the spinney, and then the ancient hedgerows as well, which you will be able to see in the citation of the sink. There's a little map below. Within those habitats there are some rarer species of both trees and plants. I'm going to show you some pictures of those in a minute, and give you a bit more of a detailed description. So we do also have some tree survey records. I believe they were from 2015, and they actually document, I think, pretty much all of the trees that were present at the time. Of course, we've done a lot more tree planting that I will tell you about in a minute, the most recent being in the December of 2019. They also document the health of the trees as well, and so from that we can say that generally our tree health across the site is pretty good, and there's not much cause for concern, only when it comes to maybe a few mature species that are not doing too well, but other than that, pretty good quality. So I'll just again give you a little bit of background. So oak trees are probably one of our most create the greatest biodiversity of any of our native broadleaf species. They can host more than 300 species at any one time, which is insane, and obviously great, and they're absolutely beautiful. I think they are our national tree, I believe. They're also important for food source throughout the year for birds and winter mammals such as badgers and squirrels. They feed on the acorns. The leaf birds are food for caterpillars and butterflies, and they create a rich mulch when the leaves fall in the autumn, which are great for invertebrates such as the stag beetle, and also for things like different types of funguses. Holes and crevices in the trunks provide great nesting spaces for different birds, bats, and all kinds of things, insects. So yes, in England, the oak is a national symbol of strength, where couples used to wed during the Stuart period. So yeah, there's a nice little nugget of history for you. So this is an example of one of our bug hotels. They were actually created by one of our beaver and cubs groups when they came to Furze Farm, and we've done this activity many times, and it's a great way to provide a home for invertebrates. So this is Furze Farm Stumpery. The Stumpery was created with the idea that we could utilise a lot of the dead wood from the site and combine it with the architectural looking logs to create a nice little area. This area has been planted with a variety of different ferns, and it has also won the Enfield in Bloom 2016 and 17, I know for sure, for best open space planting as well. And this is actually a site that the younger children tend to really love, and many a time it's been likened to Jurassic Park, and probably owing to the ferns. So here at Furze Farm we like to leave the site to do its own thing, kind of. Obviously within reason there is certain management practices that we have to kind of adhere to stop the site going crazy. We have spoken about that previously. But we do also have some formal flower beds, the biggest of which is what you're seeing now, and this is the entrance on Firs Lane, so probably the entrance most used, I imagine, by local residents, and we also have our notice board here as well, where the community can find all of the up and coming things going on with Firs Farm. So yeah, we really do try, as you can see. Unfortunately they're a bit overgrown at the moment, unfortunately due to COVID. A lot of our general maintenance work has had to be postponed, but as you can see, we like to keep this as natural as possible and kind of intersperse these formal planted beds. So I'd like to thank you for coming on this video tour of Firs Farm with me, and I really hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I've enjoyed making it for you. As you can probably tell, I'm really passionate about the work that Firs Farm does, and I really believe that this type of model, sustainable urban drainage systems, really need to be utilised more, because as you've seen, it has absolutely amazing benefits for the biodiversity here, amazing benefits in terms of flood protection and improving water quality, and we have heard so many stories from the local residents and the community about just how important Firs Farm has become to them in their everyday lives, in terms of exercise, in terms of mental health, and even in terms of recovering from surgery and long-term health problems. So, you know, this really is something to be shouted about, and so I hope that you'll join me in celebrating Firs Farm and sharing this and getting the message out there that this is how we should be managing our local green spaces.